The following is a presentation of the Premier Dance Network.
Hi everyone, Kimberly Falker here, the founder and CEO of the Premier Dance Network, the only podcast network dedicated solely to the world of dance. And welcome to Pod to Chat with your host, Barry Corellis.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks for coming to chat. I am your host, Barry Corellis, and you are listening to Pod to Chat Talking Dance on the Premier Dance Network. In this bi-weekly podcast, I candidly offer educational conversations and thoughtful analysis on all things dance. With my vast background as a director, choreographer, instructor, and dancer, I am happy to share my 18 plus years of experience with you, whether you're a professional dancer or just listening in for an insider's look into our fascinating art form. So put your earbuds in, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's talk dance. Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope that you've been doing well. I hope that you're enjoying the spring-like weather. Here in New York, it's doing its spring thing. It's like 40 degrees one day and like 75 the next. But I didn't realize how much I've actually missed like warmer weather and like the sun setting later. I guess I just hunkered down this winter knowing it was going to be like a long, challenging winter at home. And I just kind of put my blinders on to what it was like outside and just did what I do. And now that it's starting to be lighter and warmer, I actually feel like more hopeful and happy. I mean, obviously there are other reasons for that, but I definitely know that has something to do with it. Also, speaking of hopeful and happy, I have gotten my second dose of vaccine. I am officially fully vaccinated. I got the Pfizer vaccine at Citi Field where the Mets play here in Queens. It was nothing like my first experience of getting the shot where I waited 4.5 hours. I pretty much like got in and out within 25 minutes, which was a relief. But yeah, I also got really sick after the second shot. First shot, I was like kind of headachy and like tired, mildly achy. The second shot, I was like, whoa, like really, really not feeling great. So just prepare yourself for that if you do get it. I do think you should get it so that we can all get back to normal. I want to teach at some summer programs. I want to put on some performances. I want to do it indoors live with people and not doing it on a camera and putting it on YouTube. But yeah, so that is exciting and hopeful. And I'm just really grateful. I just actually, right before I got onto this recording, saw that I think something like 12 or 13% of New Yorkers are fully vaccinated. And it's cool that I'm able to be one of those people. And especially like on the 1 year anniversary of like when everything just started to go crazy. Like I'm recording this on Thursday night. Tomorrow, Friday, is the 26th of March, and that was like the day that all chaos. I mean, it was like getting worse, but like the beginning of like one of the worst periods of my life. So, it's crazy to think that within a year of that experience that I'm vaccinated and hopefully will be mostly protected, within the next week now. So yay for that. Yeah, what else? I'm traveling for the first time on a plane in 2 weeks. I was really nervous to go, but what happened was I'm teaching and judging at the main stage competition and convention in Sioux City, Iowa. And I was supposed to do it last year and it got canceled because of COVID, and they rescheduled it like way in advance. And when we started getting into conversations about it again, I was like, well, I want to do it, but I don't know if I'm going to be vaccinated. And I was really nervous to go. So I'm really excited that I'm going to be vaccinated before we go. And I'm excited to finally like start doing what I used to do and just like meet new communities and share dance with everybody from like recreational dancers in Iowa up to professional dancers that are waiting to get back on stage on Broadway and in professional ballet companies. So yeah, I'm doing that. What else? I'm pretty sure my next episode is going to be my 5th anniversary episode, which is just crazy. I need to think of something special to do for that episode. So, but yeah, 5 years of Pod of Chat Talking Dance. We started as a weekly episode, and then slowly I started to bridge out into the bi-monthly. Bi-weekly? I think they both actually mean the same thing. But yeah, started branching onto that, and I've barely ever missed a week. You actually hear my voice. I need to figure out what's going on with my voice. Ever since I got sick like a year and a half ago, I've been losing it quickly. But I don't want to lose my voice. I want to keep on doing these podcasts. But yeah, it's just crazy to think that I have been coming up with regular content so many times every single year for 5 years. It's very exciting. So hopefully we'll find a way to celebrate that. What else is happening in our regular update? I'm going to be filming a new pas de deux for online release with Movement Headquarters. I'm working with two of my company artists, Camilla Rodriguez and David Huckberg, and we will be putting that out sometime in the next month. I'm excited to show it to you. It's a very William Forsythe inspired pas de deux. For me, it was just nice to get back in the studio and start working with two dancers together, one on point, and just to be able to create. So that's kind of where I am. I'm taking little baby steps. We're doing creations here and there, and I'm actually getting ready to focus on a full evening length performance, which I guess I can talk about. Movement Headquarters, we're going to have our first live performances on the 26th and 27th of June. We're going to do a program called Solstice. I'm still planning on working mostly with individual dancers for COVID reasons, but it's going to be a celebration of the solstice, the summer solstice through solo works. We're going to be performing them at Ballet Arts in City Center, which is, they're pretty much like the studios that Balanchine created many of his most iconic ballets in, because before Lincoln Center was built, New York City Ballet performed at City Center and rehearsed at City Center. So there's some great history there, and I'm really excited to dream again about what we did. Not what we do, but what we did. I'm excited to get back into that. I'm also looking at a return of our Love Letter outdoor installation performances in August, where we go around to New York City parks and offer free performances and movement classes for the public. So yeah, that's cool. And what I guess the last thing is I'm not ready to tell you guys yet, but some very exciting news about in-person classes coming up soon. So if you are a former student of mine who has not been able to take class because classes have been closed in New York City, or if you have wanted to take class from me, I will have some information about in-person classes coming up soon, because New York is finally reopening, what are they called? In-person fitness classes, which apparently they categorize places like Broadway Dance Center and Steps on Broadway into that. So that's exciting news. So much is happening. It's weird. I feel hopeful, but I feel what's the word? Trepidatious? Is that the word I'm looking for? But I'm feeling hopeful because it does seem like we're going in a positive direction to reopen, and because I'm vaccinated. But then you watch the news and they're like, just because you're vaccinated, we don't know if it really works. Against these variants, and then the numbers, they were going down, but now they're steady and maybe going up. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to just relax and be yay, until we're in it in a good way, back to normal, but not even realizing it. But yeah, so I'm feeling hopeful. Just even to have these things to focus on coming up this summer is really exciting. And this, getting to travel to Iowa, I just hope that I can get back to what I do. So I hope that you are all experiencing the same thing, and you're also being safe while you're at it. Okay. I was thinking of episodes that I could do today, and I try to change it up. This is Pod of Chat Talking Dance. And I was actually talking to my husband, and I was telling him the topic that I was planning on doing. And he was like, well, that seems like it might be more for kids. And I just reminded him, this is Talking Dance. I talk about everything from recreational dance to professional dance, from ballet to contemporary musical theater, more ballet and contemporary because that's what I know. But I've talked about those other things. I talk about choreography. I talk about directing. I talk about being a professional dancer. I talk about pre-professional training and everything in between. So I decided that today's topic is going to discuss being ready to move away from home to train. Training to dance professionally in ballet is unlike most anything. The trajectory of training for most students who will become professional dancers goes kind of like this. You start just like with creative movement classes or like a beginner basic level ballet class for kids. You train at a home studio, and then you maybe you go from like a class a week to like 2 classes a week, and slowly that builds to like 3 to 4 to 5 to 7, however more you're doing, 10. And then maybe you start auditioning for summer intensives that are attached to larger schools, and you go to those for like a week to 6 weeks. And for the most part, you go back to your home studio and you continue training, and maybe you do a competition like Youth America Grand Prix, or maybe you focus completely in your studio. Then again, you go to summer intensives, and then maybe you get asked to stay for a year-round program in a professional training program. From there, usually students are offered a traineeship, a studio company contract, or an apprenticeship with the main company. And if that doesn't happen, they end up auditioning for companies outside of the school that they're in. And most of this happens around or before the age of 18, which is crazy because that's usually the time when kids are considering leaving home for the first time to go to college. But a lot of dancers are leaving home. I mean, I left home at the age of 17. I wanted to leave home at the age of 16. I had an offer, but my mom wouldn't let me. But yeah, it usually happens while kids are in high school, as opposed to like kids are 18 and they're thinking about going to college and then they go and live in a dormitory. It's a bit different than that. But yeah, it's rare for a ballet student to receive all of their pre-professional training at their first or second home studio. When I say home studio, I mean like the studio that they consider their base, but that is usually in their hometown. Because it's like you go to school, you go to dance, and you go home, and that's sort of what your schedule is like. Where if you go elsewhere, I wouldn't call that necessarily your home studio. Like I still consider Chester Valley Dance Academy like my home studio. Whenever I go home, I try to visit and like check in with the director and my former teachers that are there still. It isn't super common. I mean, of course, there are professional companies that have schools attached to it, and there are students that like spend their entire childhood going through those programs and then getting into the company, but that's super rare. Usually, even if the kids make it through the entire training program, they will often have to audition and go elsewhere. It's a very rare story to have a student start, like say at the School of American Ballet in New York City that feeds into New York City Ballet. It's very, very rare for a kid to start in the children's program of SAB, as we call it, and to like say their parents live locally in New York and then they just stay in the school, get into the company. It's super uncommon. So yeah, considering all of this and the generally young age of dancers, how do you know if your child or student, or if you're a kid or a teen and you're listening to this, how do you know if you're ready to move away from home to attend a finishing program? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to have some answers for you. I mean, in the end, let's start at the end and then work our way backwards. It's going to be a combination of factors that's going to help people make these decisions. But hopefully these will give you some ideas and it will help you gain clarity so that you can make the best decision possible for yourself or for your kid, or if you're a teacher that's helping guide somebody for your student. So yeah, first, one thing definitely to consider is age. I have seen a variety of ages at different programs throughout my life, that means like when I was in a program, like when I went to the year-round program for the Kirov Academy of Ballet or the School American Ballet, or watching programs like when I was at Pacific Northwest Ballet and Houston Ballet. So like being in the company and seeing students in their programs. Age is a big factor, and the one thing that I'm going to say for this is that like I can give you like a general idea, but there's always going to be an exception to the rule. And sometimes it's exciting to be an exception to a rule. Like you feel like you're special and like you're a prodigy, but more often than not, the exception to the rule ends up burning out. So that's definitely a conversation to have, but we'll get there. So age. Usually, like the average age that somebody is going to leave home to go to a training program is 17 or 18 years old. I don't want you to get too tied up in that age if you're 19 or 20, because I was one of those people that I thought that I was behind. And like back in, when did I go to school? 2001, 2002, 2003, those were my years that I had left home to train. Back then, like the bigger companies, it was more common for dancers to get in at like 16, 17, 18. So going away at 17, like right before I turned 18, felt like I have to make this happen this year. When other students my age or a little younger had already been doing this for like a year or two at that point, if not longer. These days, really, like a lot of students are leaving home at 18, 19, 20, usually after they finish high school. I know some companies have stopped the practice of hiring dancers under the age of 18 unless they're like ridiculously talented. So something has shifted there. So yeah, a good age to move away from home is usually like 18, 19, 20, but it can happen anywhere before that, all the way up to even 2021. If you think about college for more like contemporary programs, modern dance or musical theater, I switched those around. Those are usually a little bit older. It's more common to get a college degree, but when it comes to ballet, usually that happens during your high school years and like the first or second year of what would be considered your college years. Now, the reason for this is because there are so many pre-professional training programs that don't have dormitories. A dormitory is a huge expense, especially for a performing arts school. It's different in college where there are so many like universities that get so much money from tuition. Dance schools don't have, like, they try to keep their classes smaller, and it's not like they have like all these different departments for people to get degrees. Like, you're going to get your degree in dance. Now, it's not a degree, but you're going to get your training in dance. So classes usually aren't going to be more than like 20 to 30 students tops. So there's a limited amount of students that they can bring in, which means there's a limited amount of income, which means it's going to be more difficult. So there are some schools that when I was training didn't have dormitories, now do have dormitories. I believe San Francisco Ballet has one, and Houston Ballet as well. Houston Ballet, when I was there, they had just built a townhouse that I was actually accepted into when I was training, but I ended up going to the Kirov. They had a house with like a chaperone for like 6 boys and 6 girls. But yeah, the reason that a lot of these programs are accepting students a bit older is because a lot of dancers, they have to go move to a new city and they have to actually get an apartment on their own or with a roommate. And a lot of times their parents can't come with them because it's already a major expense to pay for a child if they're not on a scholarship of sorts. So the parents have to stay home and do their job. They often have other kids. But a lot of students end up in essentially like starting to live like adults. And I think that programs have had enough situations with students where they didn't finish high school and they got behind on their work, or they were mature enough to be in the studio, but they weren't mature enough to live alone, not dance alone, to live alone, or on their own. So, schools have seemed lately to be pulling in students into their finishing programs like really 17 and older. 16 and 15 does happen, but I've noticed that happens more likely in the places with dormitories attached. when I was at the Kirov Academy of Ballet, there was a 9-year-old that lived in the dorms. And I mean, everybody in the school was like, what is happening? And it was definitely a situation where like the parent was really pushing the kid to have this career, and the kid, I believe, ended up burning out from what I've heard, which makes sense because like living in a dormitory is not like having a parent taking care of you. There are like dorm parents or resident hall advisors, things like that. But a kid at that age needs like boundaries and rules and guidance and affection and a bunch of things that you're not going to really get in a dormitory. So I think that what this like I was thinking about it after like years and years after it happened. And I think what happened was that the parent kind of emulated the system of training in Russia, where kids are taken away from their families at a very, very young age, at like 10 years old, to live in these dormitories. But I think that those dormitories are set up differently. Don't quote me on that, but I think that there's a different level of support for those kids. This dormitory was not set up to care for all the needs of a 9-year-old. And while the kid made it through the year, I'm sure that it had a lasting impact. So, I mean, in my opinion, I don't think you should be moving away from home any younger than 15 at the absolute earliest. But there's so many other factors if they were 15 that would go into that. If a parent thinks their kid should train at a school and they get into it for their year-round program, I honestly think like under the age of 15, the parent needs to move with the kid. It's just, at least in the United States, there are no schools that really seem to be equipped to take care of like a kid that's a preteen or younger. Obviously summer program's different. It's a shorter period of time. It's kind of like a camp, like a overnight type camp. But when it comes to like living your life, not just like a camp for the summer, I definitely think that for a year-round program, 15 at the absolute earliest if they qualify under a few of the other topics I'm going to discuss. So yeah, age is one thing that's going to help you determine if you're ready to move away from home to train. I know you're going to think I'm going to talk about dance next, but I'm not. Maturity is a big thing too. They're like 16 for one kid is not the same for 16 for another kid. You really need to look at the kid and see how mature they are. Can they go into any dance studio and generally get along with people? Or do they become very defensive and argumentative? Or do they get really, really shy and sort of like cower into a corner? If that happens, the kid might end up being really, really lonely and get really, really depressed. And if they don't know how to interact well with others, it's going to be very difficult when they are living on their own in a new city with the stresses of this program and trying to finish their schooling on top of it. You really need a kid that is mature to move away to train. And I think that that's also part of the reason why the age of students leaving for finishing programs has gotten higher over the years. I think that there were these students that were talented, and then they would show up, and what would end up happening is their talent would be squandered because they would just end up in awkward or difficult situations where they weren't mature enough to handle the life outside of the studio. Because for dancers, yeah, life inside the studio, especially when you're training, like that becomes your life. But at the same time, you have to find a balance. And if you're not mature enough to socialize well, if you're not mature enough to be able to handle certain topics that might come up, it's not going to be good. And I mean, things that do happen in these schools, and I'm not saying this is like a problem everywhere. Drinking happens. There was a dancer in the school at Pacific Northwest Ballet who ended up having to leave the program early because she would work her rear end off during the days, and then she would go home, and she was 17, and she would get really, really drunk and out of control. And finally the family was like, it's time for her to come home. That has happened. But I've also seen 15-year-olds who can take great care of themselves and end up having wonderful careers where they become stars of companies. So it really does depend. I think that you need to make sure that a couple things happen, like maturity-wise, for kids. You need to, make sure that they understand nutrition and how to feed themselves properly. Even if it's in a dormitory with a cafeteria, like there are bad options for food. There are good options for food. I think it's really important that your kid knows what sex is. They don't need to have had it or be in, know all of the dirty details. But you have people coming of age and they're going to be amongst peers. And my friend's going to kill me for this. I'm not going to say names, but you know who you are. When I was at the Kirov, I had a friend who I'm still friends with today. And if you said the word sex or anything sexual around her, she was homeschooled and she had very little interaction outside of her family and the small group of people they homeschooled with. But if you said it, she would turn bright red, giggle, and then run away. And granted, it was funny and it was immature, and we still laugh about it today. But it's just one of those things where it's not about fitting in. It's about being mature enough to know, like, this is how you use protection if you get into a situation where you want to do that, or this is how you say no if you get into a situation where you're alone with somebody and you don't want to do that, or this is what people are talking about so you don't feel awkward, and so that you can. It's maturity. You don't have to be an adult. You don't have to have had adult experiences, but you need to do that. You also need to talk about partying and drinking and drugs, because it does happen. It's like college, except college at a younger age. All of the things that you would want your kid to know, and all of the maturity you would want your kid to have to know that, like, sometimes you might do something and you might realize, like, I shouldn't have done that. How do you handle that? Or if I do this, there might be consequences. Some people do this. Just like for instance, drinking. Across the world, people drink. They do it in moderation. If you've never done it and you do find that you're going to do it, I hope you would choose not to do it, but maybe just know these things about drinking. Just go about it that way. And honestly, if you can't have that conversation with your kid, there's no way that they should be going to a boarding program or a pre-professional training program in a city where they don't have a dormitory. So yeah, maturity has a big thing to do with it. That 9-year-old, when I was at the Kirov, she was actually pretty mature for a 9-year-old. But I mean, she was 9. So pretty mature for a 9-year-old means she acted like she was 11. So I tell everybody that I left home at 17 and I was like a 30-year-old. And then as I became a professional and I finally was like, I succeeded, I can let my hair down a little bit. I like very quickly reversed and I went from like 35 to like 30 to 25 to 21 to 18 to 16. Like, I feel like I did everything backwards, but it worked for me. So no complaints there. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about skill level. So this one's the one that I think most people are probably thinking of when you're considering moving away from home. It's exciting to be a prodigy. It's very uncommon. And when it happens, not only is it exciting for the kid and the family, and the school where the kid is from to have like their name attached to them, it's also exciting for the school that's going to take them in. And a lot of times when it comes to talent, people overlook those first two things that I talked about: maturity and age. And that's one of the biggest things. I have seen a handful of prodigies since I was a teen all the way up until now, who they like were already in magazines, winning medals at competitions, like being flown internationally to galas to perform. And then they have like a 2 to 3 year career and then they quit. And I think a big reason for that is not so much because of their talent level. I've heard people were like, well, they succeeded so much when they were young, they had nowhere else up to go. But I don't fully believe that. I think what it comes down to is that their skill level did not match their maturity level and their age level. I'm jumping back, but another big thing for maturity is being able to cultivate things in your life besides dance, like beyond dance, so that you are more well-rounded. Because if dance is your everything and you're always doing well, eventually there's going to be something that happens, whether it's an injury or you don't get casted or you don't get promoted or you get fired. Those things happen. And when the one thing that always made you feel good is not there, and then you step away from it and you realize you have nothing else, you're going to be in trouble, or your student or your kid's going to be in trouble. So just because your kid is supremely talented does not mean that they should be going away from home. But you knew that was coming. Skill level is going to have a big thing to do with it. If you find that your kid or your student, or if you find as a dancer that you are starting to get to a place where you're getting all the leading roles in the school and you've been doing it for a while, if it's your first year, like, you shouldn't be like, I'm out. For me, like, a big thing was, it wasn't so much about, yes, because I was a boy, I would get like the leading roles, but for me it was, I remember very specifically, I was the only boy in my school, and then we had another boy, but he was younger, and he would come and go, the director's nephew. But I didn't realize what was happening until I went away and came back. So I loved my training. I enjoyed my teachers. I enjoyed my peers. I got to dance a lot. We did like jazz competitions. I started doing YAGP, Youth America Grand Prix. And then I went away to Houston Ballet Summer Program, and I was in a class with all boys. And I realized that I was much further behind than I knew, because for me, I was training beside all of these girls. And then all of a sudden I was beside all these talented boys, and I realized I needed to be beside these boys training to push me further. I was never going to get where I needed to be if I didn't see other people dance, so I could know, like, I need to dance. I need to, like, up my technique to do this. I needed that motivation. So for me, when I left... let me just step back for a second. So I got into Houston Ballet's year-round program when I was 16, and my mom said no. And I've talked about that in another podcast. I'm not going to get into too much depth on that. But my mom told me I had to finish high school, and I still had 2 more years left. And I told her that she was ruining my career because I had to be, like, in a class with other people at my level to push me, and also male. And this happens for females too. They get to the top level. They're younger than everybody else in the class. They're doing all the leading roles, and it's kind of like, where else do they have to go from there? So yeah, for me, I told my mom, "You're destroying my life. I'm never gonna get better. I'm never gonna have a career now." We made it happen within a year, and then it worked out. But yeah, if you find that you are at the top of the top class in your school, and you've been there for a while, and you still have a couple of years to go, that's usually a good time to consider moving on to a pre-professional training program. I'm not saying that you can't stay in one school, and I said this before, it's really rare for somebody to get into, like, be at a home studio that is strong enough and offers enough opportunities for them to just keep on training until they're ready to go pro, and then they just have to audition everywhere. It's super uncommon. It happens, but it's super, super uncommon. Usually once you sort of peak out of the school for like more than a year or two, that's when people will transition into one of those programs, and you go from being the big fish in the small pond into the little fish in the big pond, in the lake, in the ocean. Yeah, so that's that. Okay, next, finances. Finances are a big one, because finances are not as straightforward as you think. Their training programs are crazy expensive because there's multiple aspects to it. First off, you have the tuition for the program. Second off, you have housing, whether that's being in a dormitory or if that's like renting an apartment. Obviously, that includes, like, if you're in an apartment, utilities, cable, internet, food, all of that. Usually with the dormitory, they have a cafeteria, and you don't have to worry about paying, like, keeping the lights on. It's included in your tuition. But yeah, so it's also like you have to think about point shoes if you're going for ballet, and clothing and body care. Like if you get injured, you might have to get physical therapy, potentially like Pilates, gyrotonics, what else? Massage to like take care of your bodies, things like that. What else? And if you're not done with your academic training, if you don't have access to like a public school, free public school or free online school, that's another thing that might change now with like everything that's happened with the pandemic. But if there needs to be some money to make sure that your kid has a tutor, or that they can take the program that they want, or go to a professional school that they need to make sure that they still get their education while they are finishing school. I think that's, again, another reason why a lot of programs have been waiting until kids are done with their high school, because it's a lot easier to just like let them focus on their dance training than it is to monitor them doing their academics at the same time. So yeah, it can be really, really expensive for people to go. Now, obviously, there is the opportunity for scholarships, but again, merit scholarships, which means you earn them based off of like your talent. A merit scholarship is not a given. It is something that is given and not given too frequently. So you can't just expect that that's going to be a part of it. There are also financial need-based scholarships depending on the program. And usually you have to ask and you have to pretty much verify that there's a need for them to be able to give it to you. So you definitely have to take your finances into consideration, because it's going to be like, it's not just like, congratulations, you got in this program, you go. Like there's a bunch of logistical things that need to be in order, from housing to academics to food to body care to different needs of a dancer depending on their gender and what style of dance they're training in. So finances. Okay. Last thing, I've talked about this a bit already, but housing. Housing is a big thing to consider, because is there a dormitory on site? Is there like a house for a small group of students on site with a chaperone, or are you on your own? I know that a lot of people think that this would be more common, but it's actually really rare for a parent to move with their kid to a new city. I have seen it happen. Usually it ends up like mom or dad, like they separate, not like they divorce, but like they separate, and like say dad has a job that's in one place. Mom maybe goes and flies out to the city that the kid lives in, and dad takes care of like the two kids that are in school locally where they're from, and then mom stays with the kid who's training. It does happen, but that's very stressful on family life. What usually ends up happening is you end up sending the kid to live with another kid in an apartment if there isn't a dormitory situation. And then beyond that, there's the challenges of finding an apartment that's going to allow a child to live on their own, even if it's with another person. So it just becomes very complex, because you can't go to a finishing program away from home without having a place to stay. I do know sometimes people luck out. I know people that have only auditioned for summer programs in cities where they have family that they could stay with, and then they really push to get into that school for the year, and they stay with family, like aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, people like that. But that's even less common. So, yep. These are really the things that you need to consider if you're thinking about moving away from home to train. I wanted to do this podcast now because everybody's preparing for their summer programs, but a lot of people go into their summer intensives with the hopes of getting into a year-round program. So if you are one of those people and you're really thinking about like, is this the year that I really want to transition away from my home studio? These are the things that I would look at, whether you're looking at your kid, you're a teacher looking at a student, or if you are a student doing your own research, good on you if you are, and determining if this is something that you want to ask your parents for to really push to do this. So that is what I have to offer you this week. I hope that you found this information helpful and interesting. If you have any thoughts that you would like to add to this, you can always reach out to me on social media or my website, which I will give you in the outro. Also, it's been a while since I've done an audience member recommendation for a podcast topic. So if there's anything you want to hear me talk about in a future episode of Pod to Chat Talking Dance, you can also reach out to me on those methods of communication that I'll mention in a minute in the outro. So I hope that you are enjoying a happy spring. I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are healthy. I hope that you're taking care of your mental health. I just started counseling again like a week or two ago, and the timing could not have been better. So I'm really happy that I'm doing that. I hope that you'll take it into consideration as well. I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode of Pod to Chat Talking Dance. If there are any topics you'd like to hear me talk about, please feel free to reach out to me via my website contact page at www.barrycarollis.com. Again, that's www.barrykerollis.com. You can also reach out on there if you'd like to become a sponsor for our podcasts or to book master classes in ballet or contemporary technique for choreography or speaking engagements. If you'd like to check out my company, Movement Headquarters, you can visit www.movementhqballet.org. I hope you enjoyed listening in and talking dance with me. If you enjoyed this chat, please feel free to share, rate, and review our podcast on iTunes. Every bit of extra visibility helps keep these podcasts running. And if this didn't fulfill your dance fix, check out my sister podcast on the Premier Dance Network. If you want to connect with me to see where I'm choreographing, teaching, and what I'm doing in my everyday life, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, where my name is B. Carollis, or on Twitter at Bariscos. You can also check out my company on Instagram at movement_headquarters. Also, be sure to check out my blogs. I wrote for 5 years on Life of a Freelance Dancer about the traveling the country as a touring independent contractor as a dancer, and I documented that, and there are tools on there for you. I also wrote on dancing off stage, where I talked about the post-performance careers of professional dancers. Lastly, I have 2 YouTube channels if you want to check out my choreography. You can head to B. Carollis to look at my own personal choreography, and if you would like to check out the work of Movement Headquarters, you can check out Movement Headquarters as well. Thanks for listening in to Pod to Chats. I hope you return 2 weeks from this Saturday to talk dance with me. And remember to go out and support your local dance scene.